and that is You Hurt My Feelings. All right, I'm going to start this one out. You Hurt My Feelings was written and directed by Nicole Holofcner. This movie centers around four characters who all they're two couples, four characters that seem to be having like coinciding midlife crises. You've got the main character, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, plays Beth, who is an author who has written one book, is working on getting a second one published. She might have better luck at Conundrum, but she's having trouble with that and questioning her entire career. Her husband, Don, is played by Tobias Menzies, who might be the worst psychiatrist ever and counselor. He is forgetting people's names. He's forgetting what stories go with which patient, and multiple people think that they're getting nothing out of it, including the cameo by David Cross and Amber Tamblyn playing the married couple is pretty great. Those scenes are pretty awesome. And then you have Beth's sister, Sarah, played by Michaela Watkins, who is an interior designer who's wondering why her life matters. And then you have her husband, Mark, played by Arian Moayed. I'm going to go with that. Who is an actor, because this all takes place in Manhattan. And he is a struggling actor and wondering why he's still acting. All this all kind of comes to a head when Dawn is overheard talking to Adam, or no, sorry, talking to Mark. I'm getting all the names. None of the names really matter. It's just that character, that character, that character, that character. Anyway, he's talking to Mark and says that he really doesn't like the new book, but it doesn't really matter. And this is overheard by the sisters. And so now Beth is questioning whether her husband has ever supported her and whether she can ever trust him again, because she feels like the trust has been betrayed and he's been lying to her this whole time about how much he actually supports her when he was just trying to be nice. And with that, he has hurt her feelings. This movie, it started out and it felt like a lot of Julie Louis-Dreyfus, if she's not donning purple hair in an MCU movie, it feels like this is the type of movie that she's in, whether it's Enough Said or Downhill, the remake of Force Majeure with Will Ferrell. It's these quirky kind of slice of life, trying to be a comedy, but a little too close to home to be that funny, and really having some situational stuff with it. And as it settled in, I kind of dug it. The characters are really interesting. They're so real. Like, you can connect with at least one of these characters. And then on top of it, you also have their son, Elliot, played by Owen Teague, who also gives a great performance in this, I think. The performances are great, like I said, especially Tobias Menzies. I think he kind of nails this. He just kind of this aloof, lost counselor, psychiatrist who is having trouble understanding his patients and then is having trouble understanding his wife. I'm giving it 3 stars. It as it settles in, you kind of get lost in it and get to know and love these characters. It has a potential to be a little too pretentious for a lot of people, which might be why it didn't do great at the box office. And there were, some other options to see this weekend. But I think this one is worth checking out. 3 stars for me. We're going to go next to Zach. Zach, what'd you think?
Well, I'm a Nicole Holofcner fan. I believe Todd is too. I really like Enough Said, so much so that I really thought about choosing that as our deep dive a couple weeks ago in context with this movie. And I have recently rewatched Enough Said, and maybe that influences how I view this movie, because this movie has a lot of overlaps, and obviously Julia Louis-Dreyfus being chief among them. What that movie had that this movie lacks is stakes. This movie feels sort of inert at times. It kind of feels as though I get that Holofcener is trying to point out like that this starts as maybe a minute point in their marriage and maybe escalates to something that neither of them could have anticipated. But honestly, I never felt as though these people were going to divorce. I never felt as though they were going to lose their jobs. I never felt as though they were going to go broke or die or have adulterous affairs. And I'm not asking for that necessarily. It's not the director that Holofcner is or the storyteller that she is. But like in Enough Said, I mean, that was a movie about a woman's identity and the respect or lack of respect that she gets from people, and the self-respect that she has subsequently. And I think this movie starts to touch on that at times, but I think it reverts too much to formula. And the side characters are really not interesting at all in this movie. And to me, they feel like gimmicky side pieces. And the movie kind of, it's sort of emblematic of the biggest issue with the movie, which is that it feels like a sitcom. It feels like what should have been a 22-minute episode of Everybody Loves Raymond, really drawn out to a 90-minute movie that feels really long and stretched out at times, and sort of unnecessary in some of its subplots. Two other things that really bothered me with this movie that I feel like a more intuitive director might have addressed a little bit more. First of all, we never get to learn really that much about Julia Louis-Dreyfus's book. We know that it's a mystery, but we don't really understand why it's poorly written. Is it because she didn't do enough research on it, or is she just a bad writer in general? There's some speculation that she might, her initial book that she had some success with might not be that great. That's a sort of interesting direction that I wish this filmmaker had taken the story in. But we never really get to know about the book. We never really get to know about her writing process. And the other thing that I didn't like about it, that was sort of a missed opportunity, was not only does she walk in on her husband basically revealing this fact that he didn't tell her the truth, but what's even more interesting is that he continues to lie about it. He continues to tell her, oh, no, I really did like your book. And then the movie, so at that point, my interest is piqued. It's kind of like, wow, you're digging a bigger hole, buddy. You know, I've been there, trust me. But the movie never really does anything with it. It just kind of introduces it at the scene where the reveal happens, which is at a dinner. And it just kind of goes away. I don't know. It's certainly better than a lot of movies. You know, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is a great actor. I will say Tobias Menzies, I didn't think was that great in this movie. I would have liked to have seen a more interesting or unique or unusual actor play it. But I don't know. I for whatever reason, I could never get into this movie. Maybe it was that I had really high expectations. Maybe it's that I've basically liked every Holofcener movie and I really like Julia Louis-Dreyfus. But this movie was just a disappointment. And I guess the best thing about it is that it does kind of cause you to think about your own relationships, whether it's romantic relationships or workplace relationships where people put their stake or their investment in your opinion, and whether you're truthful or not maybe influences their ability to do their work well. I think a director like Oscar Farhadi would have done amazing with this material, but as it is, Holofcener, I think, loses interest in it with all these side characters and a storyline that stays, like I said, sort of inert. So I give it a reluctant 2.5 stars. It's probably better than a 2.5-star movie. It's just compared to some of her other work, it just wasn't as appealing to me, but maybe I'm a little bit hard on it.
I will say the stills from this movie that I saw before going in, I thought Tobias Menzies was Chris O'Dowd. Also,
see, he would have been a great actor to play the husband. That would have been inspired casting, and that would have made the movie, I think, much more interesting.
I honestly don't know if Chris O'Dowd could not do an Irish accent, though, so that would have been interesting. I also think the son looks like Austin Butler. All right, Todd, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree and disagree with both of you. It's kind of weird, but I don't know. Like, Amber Tamblyn and David Cross, I felt like was a throwback to what Holofcener used to be. Like, I think every supporting character is actually more interesting than the two leads. Like, I would have watched an entire movie of just this therapy sessions, even though Discount Bid Mendelsohn was in both of those and those other scenes too. I don't know who Tobias Menzies is. Holofcener has always had a real kind of perceptive gauge on groups and classes that don't normally get movies made about them, and I always like that. But this one's just like incredibly dry, and it's mildly interesting. It's most similar, I think, to Please Give, which I think is pretty clearly her worst movie. This is like sort of cringe comedy, which is fine, but it's underwhelming when it actually does it. I think Julia Louis-Dreyfus is the worst part of the movie because she's incredibly miscast. Like, this had been written for like Leslie Mann or something, or maybe Jennifer Aniston if you're going with somebody that Holofcener has worked with before, or Emily Mortimer or something, but nothing about Julia Louis-Dreyfus fits that character. I think the best part of the movie is Michaela Watkins, which is the role that Catherine Keener probably would have played if she was in this movie. I think Catherine Keener is the perfect actress for holofcener, and she misses her when she's not in her movies. I think the music is awful in this. Like, it's really out of touch and randomly put into like random places to make you feel something. It doesn't really work. And I think there's too much resolution at the end of the movie. I mean, I agree, like, screw V-necks, but I also kind of think screw this movie. I'm at 2.5 stars, but it could be 2 stars. It's 2.5 stars is whatever.
So it looks like Tobias Menzies has mainly been a television actor before this. He was in Outlander, he was in Game of Thrones, and he was also in The Crown. So those are probably his 3 biggest. He was also in the original, or the TV show Rome back in the mid 2000s.
See, I think this movie needed like some Derek Cianfrance or something. Like, it needed some real, like, someone needed to pull a knife on someone, or someone needed to go onto the street and, you know, get hit by a car. Like, there's never any indication over the course of this movie that anything seriously bad is going to happen to these people. You know that they're going to resolve their problems one way or another. You know that they're going to be fine. It just makes it, I guess, like what Todd's saying, really dry. And I agree that the side characters are I think they're played interestingly by colorful actors, but it feels like a sitcom. It feels like every scene ends very conveniently, and then it just goes on to another side character and this sort of semi-amusing situation that they get into, and nothing is really that concrete or interesting.
So really, like, you want this to be like a Sean Baker movie, and it's definitely not that. But I mean, I could see how, if you're expecting that and you don't get that would be disappointing. But I think in your review, you actually like it more than you're letting on.
I think here's the thing I will say about it. This is true of all of holofcener's movies. She is a director that makes you think. When you are done watching the movie, you do. I must say, I did kind of think about what the characters went through and if I experienced that in my own life in any way. And I think that's a testament to a thoughtful writer. Now, is the movie entirely successful? Obviously not. But if you're still thinking about it and how it impacts your life, then I guess it hits you on some level. On the other hand, I think that my wife and I have had this conversation a lot in this fight a lot, and I don't think it would affect us this way. But again, who really cares? I mean, I don't know. I just want a movie that's more in your face. I want something bigger to happen. I want the stakes to get bigger, and it just never happened.
Well, it's kind of like what I was saying. I mean, I hear what it feels like a sitcom, but at the same time, it doesn't. It feels too real life to be a sitcom. The stakes aren't high, but then again, when you're actually having these conversations, the stakes are never high.
I'm intrigued by the Leslie Mann comment too. I never thought about that. There were some times in this movie, like her book group, that felt like an Apatow scene. I mean, you just need to put Lena Dunham in that scene or something like that, or Chris O'Dowd, and that becomes something in an Apatow movie with Leslie Mann in the Julia Louis-Dreyfus scene. See, I like that. So maybe the problem is holofcener. I don't know, but this movie just needed a little bit more inertia and momentum.
Yeah,
maybe the Daniels should have directed it. No, that would have been awful.
I will say, I was thinking it was probably going to be a thumbs down for me until I started having those thoughts near the end of the movie, like you were saying, Zach, of you know, there's someone in this movie that everyone can kind of relate to, and once you have that kind of relatability in a movie, I think it's definitely worth it. So that's kind of where I was going with it.
Yeah. Well, listen, everybody who's listening to this, because we all know that we're serving the fans out there, and this was the big movie this weekend. See Enough Said, okay? Enough Said, I think, is one of the best movies of the 2010s. It's a movie that has grown immensely with me, features great performances by the late Jim Gandolfini and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and that is really a movie about something, and it also has one of the best horror, non-horror scenes of all time when Julia Louis-Dreyfus gets discovered at Catherine Keener's house. Like, oh my God, you want to shield your eyes with that shit. And that is what holofcener is good at, is the cringe sort of stuff. And there's definitely, and by the way, screw you for Please Give being her worst movie. I really like Please Give. That's a good movie. And there's some of that in this movie, but just not enough.
Was it, there's the actress, that young actress from Please Give, who can't remember seeing anything else that pops up in the therapy session. I don't remember what her name is. You know what I'm talking about?
Not really.
Oh, Sarah Steele. There we go.
I've forgotten this movie. I saw it 2 days ago. I really don't remember a lot of it either. Now, I will say the Amber Tamlyn character and they're interesting. They probably could have had their own movie.
Probably. Well, I mean, it's just real life for them.
I guess.
Anyways, so let's move on. By the way, 1.3 million at the box office. It was a fairly wide release. That's just sad. It really is.
Well, everything got drowned by The Little Mermaid.
It did. That's true. So I'm giving it 3 stars. Todd, what'd you end up giving it?
2.5.
2.5 from Todd. 2.5 from Zach. See it while you can, because it's not going to be around for very long. So